Hello, all. Welcome to our Curiosity Chat on sustainability. I am Shirin Köprücü, the Curiosity Coach. And with me here today is Dr. Gregory Unruh, who is a professor in the field of sustainability with recent books titled The Biosphere Rules and Strategy on the Sustainability Frontier, and whom you can connect with for further conversations on the LinkedIn platform. Together we will talk. Welcome, Gregory. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you, Sharon. I really was a pleasure to be invited.
Great. Yes, together we will talk about our mutual passion
Mm.
of sustainability. I grew up in Turkey with a passion for clean oceans, organic agriculture, and I have been facilitating sustainability conversations in a global chemical firm in the past 7 years in their marketing efforts.
Fascinating.
So the field of sustainability is inspiring as well as I notice one can do things. And I'm curious how you got inspired for it, how you define it. Clearly, you have done much more. You have applied much more curiosity than I did. And I'm so grateful for that. And yeah, what have you discovered about it over the past years?
Well, it's interesting, your story of growing up and being interested in clean water and clean air. And I had a similar one. I grew up in California. I'm a continent away,
Mhm.
but very similar in was always sort of, a tree hugger at heart, as they say. And I originally studied earth and environmental sciences and earth and environmental engineering, and then went to work as an environmental consultant. Usually, though, we were going to industrial facilities that had been operating for decades, and we were trying to clean them up. And I noticed pretty quickly that trying to clean them up was a fool's errand in many ways because once the pollution gets out into the environment, it's very difficult to clean up. And we had to clean it up to this very, very precise levels at the parts per million, parts per billion level. So
Mhm.
that's like the drop of a couple drops of water in a swimming pool. That's the limited concentration, and to try to get that out of the water and soil was just a real problem. And so I quickly realized that we were spending way too much time, money, and effort trying to clean up the old messes and not enough time trying to prevent them in the first place.
Mhm.
So then I got interested in policy and politics, mostly because we were at a client meeting, and I was kind of the young, engineer cleaning up the process, and we were with the plant manager there, who's the executive, and my boss was telling him how much it was going to cost to assess the problem, and then we'd have to build these systems to try to clean the water and the soil. He was getting mad and mad, and his face just got red because he was frustrated with the costs. And and so afterwards, I just kind of popped up. Well, maybe after that, we should then start looking inside the plant to see what you're doing, because maybe we can prevent these problems in the future. And the executive looked at my boss, then he looked at me, then he looked back at my boss, and he looked at me, and he said, and just he read me the riot act. He said it was not my job to tell him how to run his plant. My job was to help him comply with these stupid environmental laws as cheaply as possible with the least disruption.
Not so curious, right?
No, not curious at all. And that's sort of when I realized that was when I thought, well, maybe then policy is the way to do this. And so I went back and studied international environmental policy in Europe, and did work with the OECD, which is an international organization. And then I was working with the diplomats that were negotiating the Kyoto Protocol to try to do something about climate change. And while it was really interesting, I realized that policy especially international diplomacy, is a very, very slow process. I mean, we just had COP 20 something, so we've been
Mhm.
the Conference of the Parties for the Climate Change. So we've been at it for 20 years, and what do we have to show for it? So I tried science and engineering, I tried policy, and then I got interested in business because I was doing my doctoral degree at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, and we had a business program, and I started taking a look at companies, and I found that if the managers of the company could see sustainability, see the value that sustainability created for stakeholders, for the environment, for the communities, and if they could see a way that at least it wasn't very costly, or better yet, was profitable, once they saw that, they could take action really fast.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like a light bulb went on. I was like, wow, it's a lot more efficient than trying to come up with policies and force them to do that. If we can find frameworks, if we can find approaches that allow them to create business value from sustainability, then they're going to do it because it's good business. And that's
That
what
sounds great.
motivated me. And that's
Mm-hmm.
and then that's since then I completed my PhD, and I've worked in business schools pretty much ever since, doing just that, trying to discover how sustainability can generate business value. And then when it becomes something they can do that generates business value, then it becomes just good business, and they continue it, or they sustain their sustainability efforts, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, given the a lot of distraction we have today for business leaders,
Mhm.
how can they pay attention to sustainability?
Yeah, so I've been doing this long enough that I've seen multiple cycles like this. So,
Mm-hmm.
there was attention and focus shift. So, right before the Great Recession, the 2008 economic downturn, there was a lot of optimism about sustainability. There were a lot of companies that were pushing forward. We had Walmart that had a big sustainability initiative. You had Unilever, and so there were these examples
Mm-hmm.
of companies that were pushing forward with sustainability. And then when the economic downturn came, you got from more conservative business outlets like the Financial Times or the Wall Street Journal. They said, well, finally the economic downturn has us focusing back on fundamentals, and we can forget all this sustainability stuff. But at that point, companies that had integrated sustainability into their business continued. They didn't abandon their sustainability efforts. They might have, reduced their spending. They might have been more careful, but sustainability continued to be part of what their brand was about, continued to be what their customers were interested in. Of course, sustainability is never the main thing customers look for, but if you give them two products that function the same way, and one is more sustainable than the other, and they cost more or less the same, customers will overwhelmingly buy the more sustainable one. So then we had sort of a bit of a downturn, and then as we came before the pandemic, as we had sort of the social transformation we went through with the George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, with the Me Too movement, and a number of these, you had then a big rush to integrate sustainability, and one of the main changes that happened during that period right before the pandemic was the financial sector got involved. And so the financial sector had historically been a barrier to sustainability because, I would interview these executives, and they'd be very excited about their sustainability efforts and very proud of what they were doing. But then they say, yeah, but investors don't care about this stuff, and so we had ESG, which is environment, society, social, and governance, became the way the financial sector was talking about sustainability. And so you had a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of efforts to have companies report on their climate performance and things. And and then we've had the backlash. We had the pandemic in the financial sector. Some of the initial enthusiasm about how they could become sustainable, uh, some realism came in, and it became clear that not every sustainability initiative is profitable, especially when the policy regime is not aligned. And then, of course, we had this here and in other places, here in the US and in other places, the conservative backlash against wokeness and DEI. So it goes in cycles. And, it's sort of, for me, it's always been two steps forward, one step back. And so we are in a one step back or maybe a step and a half back phase right now. It's a difficult time. But still, sustainability continues to be important in businesses. Most rational executives know that it's not going away, that even though we're, supposedly pulling back on regulation, what happens is we pull back on regulation. Many business people think, oh, well, then the problems go away. They don't. The problems just get worse because we're not doing anything about them. And then they come back even bigger, and we have to take even more action on a shorter time frame. So that's kind of been my experience and gives you a sense of how I see where we are in sort of the historical evolution of business and sustainability or sustainability policy.
I think you're giving you're talking about some really important points for a person, for businesses who want to honor sustainability. And I feel like when we honor sustainability, we honor ourselves, our livelihood. What do you think about with regards to that
Yeah,
values?
I agree. I think it is values based. And, I hear oftentimes, business people saying, well, it's just business, right? It's as if business is value free, right? If I take advantage of you, it's nothing personal. It's just business, right? I have to make it.
Mhm.
But that is fundamentally a value system, right? And we value economic efficiency and profitability over everything else. The problem is business people, it's like fish in the water. They've been in that environment for so long, they don't see that they're swimming
Mhm.
around. And so their implicit value system is not clear to them. And I think you're right. Once you begin to contrast profitability at all expense to broader shared value, creating, obviously the company, if it's a for-profit company, it has to generate a profit. Um, and it doesn't have to be an excessive profit, but it has to cover its costs so it can pay its employees and everything, and make a fair return to shareholders. But that doesn't mean it needs to do that at the cost of the community, of cost of the environment, of cost of other species. And we've demonstrated there are ways for companies to succeed profitably and also contribute and value other stakeholders and contribute in larger ways through their business activities.
Yeah, yeah. I would like to leave our listeners with some clear tips that you've mentioned. I just want to highlight how companies, while seeking profitability, they can look at at what costs they're seeking this profitability, and take measurements to mitigate the costs to the community, to the environment. And if the society is educated and if they utilize their strategic communications well, I hear
Mm.
that can turn to real brand value. I also hear that their environment might be turbulent, things come and go. And I heard you clearly stand up for these business people who want to honor themselves as well as their communities, that there is a possibility that they can do it. They can do it.
Absolutely, they can. And, I've never met an executive that wakes up in the morning and thinks, how can I destroy the planet today? Or, and I recognize the pressures of the economic system and the pressures of business. But if they, and I think you're right. One of the real benefits that comes from this are the brand and reputational benefits. And that comes from, as you say, strategic communication. Communicating, if they can communicate why the world is a better place because their company exists, right?
Mhm.
And if you can't do that, then there's something fundamentally wrong with your business. But if you're capable of communicating, that affects the way people perceive your company, and the way they perceive their company will affect the decisions they make toward your company. And we know this from marketing. If they have a favorable opinion of your brand, they'll be more likely to listen to your marketing message and more likely to try or buy your product. But the same thing, if for other stakeholders, if your company has a commitment that is beyond just making a profit, people are more likely to make the decision to come to want to work for a company like that, right? So it's easier to get customers if you have a reputation of treating your suppliers fairly, and you're an
Mm-hmm.
ethical business partner. It'll be easier to get suppliers, and you'll get better service. And so a lot of these things are not immediately measurable because they're more intangible, but they add up to be very valuable things. And, that's one of the challenges, I think, is, we teach in business schools for you to measure, what is measured is managed, as we say.
Mm-hmm.
And the very tangible things like how many, what's my inventory, what am I paying my workforce, what is my competitor's price? Those things we can easily measure. But these things about people's attitudes towards your company, the way stakeholders care about you, affects the decisions they make. It's harder to measure, but the cumulative effect of building that kind through that strategic communication, building that kind of reputation relationship in the world, fosters great advantages for companies. And one of the ways to do that is through your sustainability initiatives.
Yeah, yeah. And technology has advanced so much that it helps us measure things that were harder for us to measure. Um, but with that, I want to thank you very much for sharing our passion for sustainability, um, and how we notice that shared value can be created through shared impact, and it can turn into real economic impact. And we wish our listeners as inspirational conversations and strong initiatives.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you. Thank you.